Sangiacomo family, one of California's largest grape growers, has been farming in Sonoma Valley since 1927. But the family's agricultural roots began over 100 years ago in Italy, where Vittorio and Maria Sangiacomo were born in small villages outside of Genoa.
Vittorio Michael Sangiacomo was born in 1896 to Luigia and Angelo Sangiacomo, who lived in Montesoro, a small town adjacent to Isola del Cantone and 40 minutes train ride from Genoa.
Vittorio was from a large family, the eldest of 11 children. At 8 years old, he began working as a shepherd in the surrounding hills.
They lived off the land. They didn't have abundance of food, but they always had cheese and polenta, which they grew on their farm. And he was encouraged by his father to go to the United States because it was a better world, he thought.
Vittorio's father came over around the turn of the century and dove into the workforce.
One of the jobs he had it where the telegraph hill is. There's still a quarry there, and he worked in that quarry. What they do with that rock, part of it they filled in a financial district, and then the other part the ships used for ballast. He went back to get his family, and his wife didn't want to come, so she didn't come. So my grandfather died, but he told my dad, you know, get to America there, it's a great area.
Vittorio took his father's words to heart, and in 1913 he borrowed $200 from his mother and set sail for America, leaving her behind. He was just 17 years old.
And he got sick, seasick going over.
And he took the boat, it was third class, and landed in Ellis Island, and then from Ellis Island he came to California, I'm assuming by train.
And he went to work for that company that had that vegetable garden in Bay Farm Island. It was, I remember him saying he was getting $1 a day, and it was from daylight till dark.
It was 16, 17 hours a day, all bend over, you know, and truck crops and that.
They had stew, I think he said, every night. And I guess you sat at the table by seniority, because he said that by the time he got the stew there was no more meat in it. It was all meat and potatoes and carrots. So he, even when he was later in life, he still never liked stew. He wouldn't eat it if he could help it.
They slept on straw with a blanket.
Yeah.
Vittorio repaid the $200 within a year and moved to San Francisco, where Italian friends introduced him to the scavenger business. He quickly became a partner in a new scavenger company.
There were several of these little scavenger companies, and there was a kind of, not fighting, but intermingling. But there was an Irish mayor in San Francisco by the name of Rolfe, and he got several of the leaders together, and he told them, look, you guys got to form two companies here, and otherwise you're going to lose this garbage franchises. So they formed two companies. One was the Scavengers Protective Union, and the other one was the Sunset Scavengers.
With his earnings from the business, he began saving for the future. Meanwhile, Maria, who was 13 years younger than Vittorio, was still a young girl growing up in a rural village near Genoa.
Maria Julius Mangini was born in Monteleone, which was a town next to Lusiga. It was a small town. Maria had 5 siblings. 3 of them, including herself, was born in Italy. And they had slate mines, I think. There were slate mines in the area. She came to the United States with her mother, sister, and brother, and she was 8 years old. And her father had sent for them to come, so they had a place in San Francisco.
Although he arrived a penniless immigrant, within a few years Vittorio had saved enough to purchase several properties in San Francisco.
And he bought a first house, I think was in Telegraph Hill in San Francisco, and tells me the story that he had some others, but he sold one house and he made, I don't know, a couple $1,000, and he said, "Geez, you don't know how that meant to him, that $2,000 that he made reselling the real estate." From then on, not in a big way, but he liked real estate, and he did do he'd buy and sell. He didn't sell much, he bought a lot. When the streetcar came out into that area, the price of property just went sky high. That was just the time that automobiles were coming in.
Don't forget, at that time, it was the roaring 20s, too. And it was really, the 20s, there was a lot of people made money in it.
It was around the same time that Vittorio began visiting a friend in Sonoma. Together, they loved soaking in the hot mineral baths at Boy's Hot Springs. On one of those trips, Vittorio made an important decision for his future.
He was in the garbage business there, and there was a Biso. And he came up at, I don't know, 4 or 5 years before my dad came. And he had the ranch next door here. And my dad used to come up and see him, you know. And he used to go to Boy Springs in those days to take those hot baths. And this ranch came for sale, and he bought it.
He fell in love with it, and he bought it for about $35,000. Gotta remember, the $35,000 then was like several million now.
Vittorio purchased the ranch in 1927, just 14 years after arriving in America. A farmer at heart, he was thrilled to return to the land.
When they bought the ranch, it was all deciduous fruit in a variety. They had eggplant, orange plums, they had peaches, they had pears, they had apples, they had cherries.
Vittorio picked a winning ranch. The first record of cultivation there dates back to the 1840s. In 1872, two San Francisco merchants, Howe and Hall, established the Edendale Ranch. They quickly became well known for their fruit, shipping quince and peaches by boat to SF and by train to St. Louis and New York.
We have a picture of the ranch down there next door, that Dick Watts place. A guy with a beard, pruning, had a horse with a sled there, and it was 1868. Gary Keyser gave it to us. And this ranch here, it probably came, it was in the 1851, 52, or 54, they developed all this here. A lot of history to it.
Once Vittorio had the property in escrow, it was time to get married.
Well, they had a very, their courtship was very brief. I don't know how, I should say their engagement was very brief. And, it was San Francisco. Her dress was beautiful. And it was a very small, I think mostly family and friends. And they got married in the church, and then they had the reception at their home. And they were married in 1928, May 28, 1928. My mother was 19, and my dad was 32.
The young couple built a new home on the ranch and moved to Sonoma soon after the wedding. Their new home, Sonoma Valley, was an idyllic agricultural community. The newlyweds' first year was wonderful, but overnight things changed when the stock market crashed on October 29, 1929, just 6 months after their first child, Lorraine, was born.
The Great Depression came, and they had a big mortgage on the ranch, and they struggled through it, and with the property in San Francisco. He was getting some rent. That helped him go along, but they had some tough times.
In spite of their own struggles to survive, the young couple never turned away a hungry man throughout the Depression, particularly those hit hardest by the Dust Bowl.
You know, I remember the Depression very, very well. A lot of our workers were migratory those days, and you know, they were poor people. They weren't poor people to start with. The Depression made them poor people. My dad felt sorry for him, because when he left Italy, I'm not so sure that he wasn't a little hungry.
World War II brought new workers to the Sangiacomo ranch, including, oddly enough, German POWs.
When the World War II got going pretty well, the shortage of labor was still there. They had a camp up here in Sonoma County that had German prisoners. I remember we used German prisoners to pick fruit and work in the fields.
Shortly after the war, the Bracero program brought a wave of Hispanic migrant workers to the Sangiacomo ranch. One worker arrived from Mexico and still lives on the ranch today with his extended family.
He's living down here now, him and his wife, Rafael. He was one of the first Braceros.
You know, was working, and the next year he bought his wife back, and the whole family eventually moved up. But he was living in one of our houses and he's still living in that house.
Like most ranches, even today, Vittorio and Maria depended greatly on the help of their children, Lorraine, Angelo, Buck, and Bob, born between 1929 and 1937.
We used to work in the ranch and all that. We used to have this Model A Ford cut down, and when we were picking pears, you know, they'd drive right down there. The pickers would put their boxes right by the trees, and we had a crew go in there and they'd load them on this Model A Ford.
That 1932 Ford, every member of our family learned how to drive in, plus the cousins, and it went down the line.
We started driving when we were pretty young.
Everybody worked. I did not work in the field, but I hated that Saturday. We used to have to clean those knives and forks dry. Just, what am I doing here? But anyway, that was our job. My brothers worked out. They worked after school, and they worked on Saturdays.
Despite the long hours of hard work, there was still plenty of time for fun.
The ranch was like our playground, so we used to, you know, we could go out anytime, and as long, about even 4 or 5, maybe 5 or 6, we were outside all the time. I liked the creek of the ranch. That was a big, big treat, you know, to go to the creek. We'd take our old shoes and go wading. My dad and mother were of the old Italian school that they always had good food on the table. There was always, am I correct or not?
No.
You know, they invited a lot of people here for dinner. Like lunches, there was always people here.
Anybody that came in the house, they stayed for dinner.
And when the time came, the kids headed off to college. Angelo, Bob, and Buck to the University of California at Davis to study agriculture, and Lorraine to Lone Mountain in San Francisco for nursing. Growing up on the ranch, the children were exposed to the workings of a family business from the beginning.
Father, he taught us the right way. In other words, he wasn't a big negotiator or anything. He just was good. He was good to people, and he was good with people. We hope that that's rubbed off on us. But he was good to labor. He was a labor man as far as being good to workers, and that taught me a lot, because I think that we try to, our whole ranches and all that, we try to follow it. And I think we do a pretty good job.
My dad always told us you can't sit still. Don't go overboard too much, but you got to keep moving a little, you know? And that was the best education he could have gave us. My mom was good that way too. I remember my mom, she'd come there and we'd be packing apples. She'd be out there helping pack apples. Then at a certain time, about 4:30, she'd get everything and come up here and cook dinner for us. And everybody produced when they were coming up there, but she was a good mom. We had a good life, we really did.
After the war, Vittorio steadily bought or leased more land to plant pear trees in order to support a growing family.
My dad was, he loved real estate, and whenever things were going okay and he saw something good buy or something, he'd plunge.
He bought Catarina primarily because there wasn't enough land for the family. So when they bought that, then they were able to plant more. My dad's profession, that I look back now, was also in real estate, which I did not realize at the time, and then in farming. But he always needed that to to have a little bit of certainty in his income, because in farming you do not know.
The same year that the Catarina Ranch was purchased, Buck was drafted and served 2 years in the Korean War.
I drove an ambulance and that stuff, but and also when things got rough and the wounded come in, you helped and all that,
Several years later, Bob enlisted.
Bob enlisted because he felt that it was a thing to do.
Angelo, Buck, Bob, and Lorraine, then in their 20s, began to take over the daily operations of the business. Following in their father's footsteps, they continued to carefully select and acquire more land. As the business grew, so did the family. Angelo met and married Diane in 1968, a year before the first vineyard was planted.
Well, we knew each other a while, but we had a short courtship. I mean, it was less than 6 months we got engaged. Ange is Ange, sweet, kind, nice, considerate, I don't know, I don't know how you say how you fall in love with somebody, you just do.
Well, I was 38 years old, and Diane was much younger, but in marriages, everything's got to click, but if it clicks, it happens.
Buck married later in life. He was 57 when he and Sue exchanged vows.
I was in my 50s when I got married, and my wife, she was, I met my wife way back, and we were always friends, and then, I don't know, we got together and we got married and that stuff, but we're no kids, but we always had a couple dogs.
Soon, Angelo and Diane had 3 young kids, Mike, Steve, and Mia, who all fell in love with the ranch and being a part of the family business.
Growing up on the ranch really makes you involved. We used to get up for frost protection a lot on weekends. It was fun because you got up to got a donut at 6 in the morning, so that was kind of an enticing factor to get us out of bed. But I love getting up on weekends. I think just going out, just being in the car pickup with my dad and uncles and stuff. I think I cherished that as a kid. But then also, you get, being on the ranch, you really see everything going on from, workers in the field, what they're doing, and then, the hearing all the activity and just, smelling it, breathing it, and feeling it. So I think there's a special component to that of really being there your whole life. It's kind of through osmosis, you kind of really intake a lot of it.
We were very close to our aunts and uncles because we were always over at the ranch. So I had good memories of spending evenings with them when we were real little, and they were good. They were a little bit like big cousins more than uncles.
My biggest memories are just driving in the vineyards in the truck with my dad, my uncles. I do just riding, and they checked on vineyards every day, and that was like my biggest memory of just driving alongside them.
My grandmother, she was the sweetest lady, and I remember, getting my mouth washed out with soap when I swore, but she was so caring and loving.
Over time, though, the market for pears was getting tough, very tough. Air freight and improved technology in food refrigeration meant that canneries, the Sangiacomo's main customers, were on the decline.
When we had all those pears, we knew that we couldn't keep, it just wasn't working, and volume of fruit being canned was going down, and that was our business. We were in a co-op cannery, canned a lot of fruit and all, and it was doing okay, but our net income was going worse and worse and worse.
But change did not come overnight.
Yeah, well, you know, it was hard pushing them out. For my dad, I'm sure it was hard. You know, because he had planted a lot of those, and I planted some of them. But, I mean, you got to be practical.
The decision to shift from cultivating pears to wine grapes was a risky one, and rather than jumping in head first, they initially waded into the market.
We actually planted 200 acres before we pulled any pears.
The first vineyard, named Green Acres, was planted in 1969. It didn't take long for the family to see that they were on the right track.
Saw that the vineyard industry was coming on stronger and stronger. There were some big plantings going in already, and we just could see that they were doing okay. So we started slowly and then kept going. There's a saying, you plant pears for your heirs. It takes them 8 or 10 years here for us to get them producing. So we worshiped them when they were growing and nursed them along, and then all of a sudden you're pulling it out. My father was right behind, he was behind us 100%. He had no objection whatsoever. He was a businessman. I remember saying, geez, Dad, we're losing $250,000 a year on them. You know what his words were? Pull those son of bitches out.
And pull them out they did. By 1981, the entire ranch was converted to wine grapes. Mike and Steve remember what it was like as the pear orchards were being ripped out.
Most of my memories from a kid are like I said, in a pear orchard. I have a lot of memories as a kid, loading boxes and so forth, and that was really, and then when they pulled them out, that was a little bit of a, tugged on your heart, I have to say. So, and I know it did on the rest of the family, but it was a survival mode. We weren't going to be able to sustain this and for the future generations, and we were just very fortunate, and through the hard work of my dad and uncles and my aunt, they were able to successfully make the conversion.
The pears were pulled out in 1981, so I was 5 or 6 years old. I definitely remember them. I remember the bulldozers coming in and pulling out beautiful, full-grown pear trees. There's more effect on me now, looking back, of kind of what it meant to my dad and uncles and aunt. So I have a better perspective on what a big change of life and change of business it was.
After they took the plunge, the family drew upon decades of farming experience to lay the foundation for their future in the wine industry. But it wasn't always easy.
We hit some bad years in the grapes, because in 1974 we got $1,100 for Chardonnay. In 75 we got $175. So we hit tough times even in the grapes. We never were at a point where we made a lot of money, so we had a lot of cash hanging around, to be truthful. We were just going from year to year, and our intent was, though, to be successful and to keep this land and use our capacity to borrow.
There's a lot of acreage here, but divided by 4, well, you're not that big.
We did everything that we could to be secure, so we wouldn't get into, they didn't have underwater clauses those days, but we didn't want to get underwater.
Early on, the family committed to establishing win-win relationships with the wineries.
Our big thing is to sell grapes, and good quality and sell grapes. And in other words, if there was a shortage of grapes, we never jammed the winery to pay a lot more money on it. We wanted our fair share of it. Our thing was that we both sit down and work it out and make it fair for both people.
It's two sides of the street. One time you're on it, on this side, the next time you're on the other side.
We have that saying that, you know, you dance to who took you to the dance. So what we're trying to do is dance with who took us to the dance.
If somebody wanted to come in, and we had a few contractors, they wanted 2 pounds of grapes, we sold them. And a lot of those people, they were just starting out too, and they ended up big wineries now.
A focus on quality and service positioned them to be on the forefront of the emerging trend of vineyard-designated wines.
We're among the first that put a lot of effort on Centennial vineyard designation through quality.
But along with the joys of life came sorrow. Vittorio passed in 1987 and Maria in 1995. Then suddenly in 2006, Bob fell ill and died of cancer at age 68.
He said, all I really want is to be able to get up and have my coffee, get my paper, and then come down to the vineyard.
I'll tell you one thing about Bob, though. He'd oversee something, and boy, if it wasn't right, he'd pick it up, just like that. Bob did a good job, and he liked his work. He did.
Honestly, the best thing you can say about Bob, in my opinion, is that his loyalty, you know, unwavering loyalty to the family. I mean, he really felt that he was the guy that had your back.
100 years have passed since Vittorio set foot on American soil. Now the third generation, Mike, Steve, and Mia, is farming over 1,700 acres of vineyards. Dozens of wineries purchase Sangiacomo grapes, and more than 30 produce vineyard-designated wines.
But everybody understands that this is a long-term thing, and to be successful long-term, you have to have a long-term outlook. And that means doing things the right way, you know, taking care of the land, taking care of your employees, you know, taking care of, you know, being a good steward in the community. So
it's not about, you know, next year, we're going to be here for next year, multiple years. And so we view everything as give and take. Every 4 or 5 years, there's a cycle, you know, where there's oversupply, undersupply. So, I mean, I think we have over 20 wineries we've been working with for 20 years. So, you know, we call it our 2020 vision of, you know, really that's what it's important is you know, we're going to be around here, the wineries going to be around here, so we have to work together to get through all the tough times and then relish the good times together as well.
I think it's continued to evolve that, you know, from 100 years ago, I'm looking at how am I going to grow this crop so I can feed myself and my family, to today trying to continue to feed yourself and your family, but also to try and make it sustainable, interact for generations to come.
But maybe, in the end, the value of these 100 years is really about being a family and working side by side through good times and bad.
I just think that we just stuck to hard work and good principles, and I think that's how we've got to where we're at.
If the business never changed, we wouldn't be here, you know, and I know it's changing every year, different things. It's got to change, and that's what's keeping us going ahead, not us, everybody.
One of my strongest memories is when my grandma was dying. And I just remember she said, just don't ever be jealous of each other. You know, that's what tears families apart. And
well, you know, we didn't have vice presidents. We didn't have all that. Everybody was boss. And somehow, when a work was going on and when something had to be done, the person that should do it automatically got there.
I give my grandparents great credit for immigrating from Italy, this country. That's a huge risk, and then being able to work their way into owning their own ranch. And then I give my dad and my uncles and my aunt credit. I mean, they were in a position where they had a successful orchard going. It was going backwards. It was struggling, and they had the vision to see that, hey, this wine industry is going to be a real player in California. There's real opportunity. So they remortgaged the whole ranch, tore out pears, and planted vineyard. And that was a huge risk. So each generation has taken huge risks and been very successful at it.
My brother Bob died. He told me, he didn't tell me, but I heard him tell. He said if I had to do it over again, he said I'd do the same thing over again. So I would do the same thing over again too.